Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host. I'm your moderator. I'm also the creator and publisher of thechocolatelife.com. Today, what I've got is a special guest who is one of the co-founders of one of the more interesting and influential online sellers of specialty chocolate in the United States today, and that's Pashmina De Shon. Pashmina, welcome to Pod Save Chocolate.
Hi, Clay. Thank you.
Certainly you opened in about 2015, as I recall. And so, I've certainly known of you. You're not that far away from me in Denver. When I moved out here to Arizona last year, I was like trying to come by and see you in
Yeah.
Denver, make a side trip to Denver. But before, to put people into the context, it's like, okay, 2015, you and your co-founders, like, why specialty chocolate? Why bar and cocoa? Did you have background in this? Like, how did bar and cocoa come together?
Yeah, great question. So we actually have a background in marketing, and we were doing a lot of marketing for e-commerce companies at the time in 2013, 14, 15. And I always thought to myself that it would be kind of fun to have something where we had our own e-com company where we could market our own products. And so that was like our specialty sauces marketing and understanding how marketing works online. And I kind of fell into chocolate by accident. I had tried a bar that I bought from a specialty grocery store here in Denver, and then was seeking to buy more, and I couldn't really find much of it in Denver at the time. And so I started buying stuff online, and I felt like a lot of the experiences that I came across, whether it was the website or the shipping experience or the quality of the chocolate I was buying, left a lot to be desired. And it's like we kind of just threw spaghetti at the wall on the wall. So we in 2015 we launched with a club, and so what we were doing was just shipping 4 bars in a box every month to our subscribers. And this was sort of just like a side hustle to see if there was any interest. So from 2015 to 18, we grew the company just purely as a subscription, and it was really. And then in 2018, we launched the store, and from there, it has definitely grown into a much larger endeavor than we imagined. And so that's where we are today.
In a very good way. So, when I tell people my chocolate story, one of the things that I say is that I got into the chocolate business as a result of a business decision. I did not get into chocolate because I was a lover of chocolate. I learned to love chocolate as a
Yeah.
result of getting into the chocolate business. Would you say that your experience is kind of the same?
Uh, I think it started as love for sure. Like it was more
Okay.
of like, how do we get this to other people, and how do we share this amazing thing? Because I feel like a lot of people know a lot about coffee or beer or wine, and you have a lot of passionate communities that are much larger than the chocolate community. And it didn't make sense to me that it wasn't until my mid 30s that I found out kind of the truth about chocolate, if you will, like that there is all this flavor, and that everything you buy in the grocery store, like most of the industrial chocolate, is like very singular, very flat, very flavorless.
Mhm.
We think of, before buying craft chocolate, I used to think of chocolate as just like a singular flavor. And now, I've learned that obviously it's a lot
Right.
more than that. And it's kind of like
Mhm.
wine, like you have this like explosion go off in terms of flavors, and it changes your whole mindset
Mhm.
around what chocolate can be. And then it's just a travesty that, a lot of industrial chocolate is supporting some very unethical means in farming and
Mhm. Right. So what I would say is that I was also in my mid 30s when I discovered chocolate. Um, did you mute yourself all of a sudden? Can you
yeah,
talk? Okay.
it did just suddenly. I think the
Yeah.
speaker went cut out. So what did you just say?
So, what I would say is I also didn't discover chocolate until I was in my mid 30s. However,
Yeah,
my mid 30s was in the mid 90s.
right.
Okay, in terms of that. So I do want to take a quick break and do a quick shout out to Mike King at Encore Coffee in Kansas City, Missouri. So who says good morning to me and to you, Pashmina. Mike, thanks for joining us again today. And to remind everybody who might be watching, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can go into the live chat, you can go into the comments, you can let us know where in the world you're connecting from. And then, of course, if you have any questions for Pashmina about what it means to try to sell specialty chocolate online, you can ask that question. You can ask that question of here. I also want to remind everybody that I put together a post for every single episode of Pod Save Chocolate. This is episode number 43. This post is online right now. You can go there. There is a link to the Bar and Cocoa website, so you can follow along. And this is something that I do for every single episode. And we're going to go through this really, really quickly. There's a question I want to ask Pashmina about some of the information that's on the website, but you can go there and you can see what it is that's what's in there in this episode, and I will update it based upon anything else that comes up that seems to be that I want to put a link in to today's post about it. So, Pashmina, I had a chance to speak with Lauren Adler, who's the founder of Chocolopolis. Okay, I'm going to go straight into the business a number of years ago, and she described the process that Chocolopolis went through, right, in order to be able to figure out what new brands they were going to be taking on. Now, and as I realize, I've got to make sure that I click the right link here. You have on your website a list of all of the makers that you're currently selling in various. I'm looking for it, and we'll get there later. But so if I am a small chocolate maker, and what I want to do is I want to send you my chocolate, right, to see if Bar and Cocoa is interested in selling my chocolate. What is the process internally that you and your team, right, use to determine which brands you're going to carry, right? And are there things other than the obvious, it has to taste good, right, that you and your team consider as a part of the process of saying, here's a brand that we want to we want to represent, and to some extent, we're staking our brand reputation on these other brands. So can you start? Let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it has to taste good, right? That's number one. Does it taste good? Does it present well? So flavor is definitely a big factor for whether or not something will pass the litmus test and kind of pass the first gauntlet of whether we wanted to carry something. Then from a business decision, we also want to pick products that we know we can sell. So packaging does play a big role in that. I mean, unfortunately, no one can taste the chocolate online when we're selling it. They can't lick the screen. They're completely judging a book by its cover in many cases. So the packaging needs to be able to sell the chocolate and tell the story.
That is a real failure of modern, internet technology. Is nobody has created smell-o-vision right across the internet yet. I mean, it's anybody looking for the next unicorn product out of Silicon Valley. That might be it, right? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just had to make the joke.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, those two things are really important, like flavor and packaging. And then from a business standpoint, we also want to have realistic expectations around our margins. And we want to make sure that this is something that we can buy at a wholesale price that makes sense for us in our business. And then as we've grown and like now as there are more and more new makers coming out with products, the other thing we're looking for is, does this chocolate maker bring something unique to the table, right? So is it, like no longer is it enough to just say, oh, well, I make these for single origin 70% bars and an 85 and call it a day. Like you want to bring something unique to the table in terms of what you're either adding to the chocolate in terms of your storytelling or some unique flavors, or to have a lineup that offers something unique. So like, for example, Theo and Fila, one of the brands we carry, it's very popular. And I think one of the reasons it is popular is because they've really leaned into sense of place, and a lot of their flavors are illustrative of like things that people are familiar with in the Philippines and desserts that you might find there. And they have some inclusions and flavors that no one else is making. So they do very well. And so I encourage any new maker, especially the ones that are made at origin, to kind of lean into that and explore flavors that may be unique to that country of origin.
So I think that the question comes. So one of the things that I've said, I mean, just I'm going to ask you to validate this for me. Is one of the last things that the world of specialty chocolate needs is still yet another 70% two ingredient made in a melanger, from Atkinson estate beans, right? So
Yeah.
it's so. While I think that it is necessary for any specialty chocolate maker to have a specialty chocolate which represents, here's my idea of how to interpret, the beans that come from this famous origin. How important is it to you, right, and the kind of counsel that you give to the people who come to you to literally lean into this? I'm a chocolate maker in a producing country, right? So what I need to do is I need to focus with beans that come from my place, right? And then also focus on what is it that makes the local food culture unique, right? That I can interpret through that lens as well. Because this is something that you may know about this, this made in a producing country awards program called the AVPA. So
Yeah.
the Agence Valorisation Produits Agriculture, right? Just am I wrong or am I right when it comes to this idea? Is like, if you're going to do another 70% two ingredient made in a melanger chocolate from, beans that everybody else buys, you have to do something pretty interesting and pretty special with it. Or is it just, I'm overthinking it?
Yeah, I agree. I think anyone who has been eating chocolate for a while is yeah, they're looking for something truly unique. Or you're so confident in your chocolate making abilities that you think you are head and shoulders above anyone else in terms of their interpretation of that two ingredient bar, let's say using Akasson beans. And I think Akasson, Madagascar is probably a good way for a lot of chocolate makers to cut their teeth to see if they actually are as skilled as they think they might be, and compare their iteration of that Madagascar 70 with other people and other Madagascars that are already out there, right? So it's almost like it's a good testing ground for new makers. But then once you have like your stable of 70%, like maybe you have two, I think it's important to venture out and try new things so that your lineup and your collection that you're selling to other stores, and as you try and expand the business, isn't competing with the exact same product by another maker.
Right. The sale is all, if I can, especially in a retail setting, that the sale is already difficult. I look in and I say, here's a 70% no added cocoa butter, right? And I've got 4 different companies and they're all doing what ostensibly is the same thing. I mean, it
Yeah.
just makes the decision making that much harder,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
On the part of the customer, and you can. So there are a bunch of, like, my brain is shooting off in a bunch of different directions. But before we do that, I want to say hello to Susana Cardenas, who's connecting today from Manabí in Ecuador. Susana, thank you very much for joining us today. And if you have any specific questions, I don't know, because I don't remember, which Ecuadorian makers you're representing at the moment. I don't want to put you on this. I don't want to put you on the spot, Pashmina. But thank you very much, Susana, for connecting today.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't actually have any Ecuadorian makers at the moment. We have some internal dialogue about why we haven't done that yet, but that's not something I think I can talk about on this pod right now.
Okay. So, but
Yeah.
let's talk. I mean, listen, Ecuador as a producing country, right,
Yeah.
as an origin, has some really, really interesting parts of the story and the history of chocolate associated with it, both negative and positive, And so, yeah, I can understand why it would be a challenge. Just another quote from Susana. You saw each other in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago at the Craft Chocolate Experience.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. Yeah.
Yep, reconnecting.
Were you there?
Here. Me personally, no, I was not there.
Okay. Yeah.
I was not there. I met you in Albuquerque at the Southwest Chocolate and Coffee Fest.
And I feel like there were a lot of events going on during the same date. So some people were
right. And the same weekend as the Craft Chocolate Experience in San Francisco was the DC Chocolate Festival. I mean, exact same weekend.
Yeah.
So it was April is getting almost as busy as October is. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's pretty crazy. So what I want to do is like go to one of these points. So this is an image that I took of the navigation, right,
yeah.
on your website, right? So this is not actually the navigation, it's just a picture of there. And so when we think about this, how has the evolution of this navigation changed over the course of the last 8 or 9 years? When you started out, was it a lot flatter? Was it a lot simpler? What are the sort of new ways? So let's go and let's zoom up on this if I can. So right, so we have these 4 categories here: featured by type, category by taste. How has these evolved over the course of the last um, decade, and how does because you're a marketer and you're specializing in e-com, I've got to imagine that this is as a point of entry for people who are looking to explore and discover what they can find, that this is a really, really important part of the way you present yourself online.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think, yeah, when we started, we didn't have that many SKUs. We had maybe 50 SKUs when we started the store. Now we have over 1,000. So it is really important to give people a way to discover the
Mm-hmm.
products that they're looking for, and also to kind of highlight things that they may not have thought of or looked at before. And a lot of this actually came from the feedback from our customers. So we, try and survey our customers once every couple years just to see like where we are and if we're hitting the mark with what our regular customers like to see. And the by taste thing came out of a feedback request where they said, oh, it'd be really nice. And we understand that these are very broad strokes, right? With the taste, it's not very specific, but it is helpful if somebody's like, oh, I really like this particular bar and it was very fruity. Are there other chocolate like this that's fruity or bold?
Mm-hmm.
We came up with these like kind of very broad stroke categories on taste, and we may expand that, to
Mm-hmm.
a couple more as we kind of refine things. And then same thing with the featured, right? The award winners was definitely something that was very much requested. And the thing is, a lot of these things, they take a lot of cataloging before we can kind of expose these things about the chocolate. So the award winners, as an example, like every single one of our products now has a tag if it has won a silver or gold in the Academy of Chocolate or International Chocolate Awards over the last 5 years. So that means we had to go through all of our catalogs and tag every single product and like go through all the archives of the award winners. We also have good food and great taste, and we've actually ignored the 1 star and the bronze because I feel like if we tag the bronze and the 1 star, then pretty much every single product, I mean, like more than 70% of the catalog would have tags on
Right.
them. So that's not
Right.
very useful. So we've limited to
Mm-hmm.
just the silver and gold winners for the award winners
Mm-hmm.
category. Um, and then, yeah,
So
I
I
think,
want
go ahead,
so
sorry.
no, I just want to jump in it because I'm looking
Yeah,
at the by taste, and I look
yeah,
at the by taste category, and one of the reasons why this caught my eye is I remember, this is going to be more than a decade ago. So before I think it's well over more than a decade ago, that
yeah.
when Cho reintroduced their bars after 2008, they introduced Here We're Going to Do, and then they went dark for a couple of years, and then they came back. They had organized their tasting in terms of, well, this is either fruity or it's fudgy or it's nutty. They only had 4 different flavor categories, and everything
Okay,
fit into one of those. And it was by origin. Ghana was chocolatey, right? And
okay. Yeah,
Madagascar was fruity. I mean, it was very, very simple, but very, very straightforward. I'm really interested in, fruity and bold are 2 very, very different ideas when
yeah.
you think about it. And I'm really, really curious as to, how that particular combination. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump away from this. Oops. And so can you tell us a little bit about fruity and bold? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, while you're doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to your website and I'm going to go look at another category. So
Okay,
can you
sure.
tell us about
Yeah,
fruity, the origins of fruity and
yeah.
bold?
Yeah, I think bold maybe has two different meanings here, right? So you could
Mm-hmm.
say bold is like maybe like the roast, where I think when we say fruity and bold, we're saying like, okay, like for someone to say that like when I think of someone who takes like something like Madagascar, they're probably under roasting it, so it's very fruity, like as in like it's almost like punchy. So that's what I mean by bold. But I don't want to use the
Mhm.
word punchy. I don't think a lot of people would understand that word. Bold is a little more understandable for the everyday man. So it's almost like, it's like not muted, right? So in the sense that like almost no but bar I would consider to be bold because it's so full of added cocoa butter, right?
Mhm.
They're not really expressing they're not really their take on chocolate is not about expressing the bean and making sure that the fruit really comes forward. It's not bold in that sense. Whereas
Mhm.
a lot of chocolate makers will, they're really trying to let the fruit express itself. So in that sense, it's like very bold. And then some of the chocolate makers may go like nutty and roasty in this case, where it's like, no, we actually want to roast it to a degree where maybe that fruit note isn't as prominent. It's not about the expression of the fruit so
Mhm.
much as expression of the right. It's almost like, if we were to equate this to coffee, the fruity and bold is almost like a light roast, and the nutty and roasty is kind of like a middle medium roast, and
Mhm.
the earthy and fudgy is like the dark roast, right? Like that's kind
Mhm.
of where I came up with those three. Is I was thinking of coffee,
Mhm.
and then weird and wonderful is of course just stuff with interesting inclusions or
Yeah,
funky inclusions.
yeah, I want to go there. But
Yeah,
before I do that, I have an overlay on this. When I think of Bonat, and that was the chocolate in 1994 that inspired me to get into the chocolate business.
yeah,
For the 100th anniversary, they were the first of the company in 1984. They were
yeah,
the first to reintroduce single origin chocolate, marketed single origin chocolate
right, yeah,
in France. But I would say that it is very classic French in style.
of course, yeah,
Right. And the
yeah,
classic French style leads itself to a particular kind of way. If I'm
yeah,
thinking of a very modern French style, what we do is we find something which is more, let's abandon, which is really, really hard for somebody in France, which is as much about, protecting cultural patrimony as it is anything else.
yeah.
So there's this, I just find it's really, really an interesting tension. So I mean, I love, so I was just a judge for the Craft Chocolate Challenge, and I love the flavored white chocolate bar category and the
Mm,
inclusions category because
yeah,
they're way about delivering what you have classified as weird and wonderful.
yeah,
So you here have Auro, which is coming from the Philippines. You have Omnom, which is from Iceland. Fjook, which is from Norway or Sweden. I forget which one of these
yeah,
two.
Norway.
Yeah, Al Nasma, Pump Street, people who know about Pump Street Bakery and Chris Brennan's work. I mean, so going back to the previous page, which
Yeah,
is here, um, how are your sales? Do you know how your sales distribute? If I'm a first-time buyer, am I
yeah,
buying out of Fruity and Bold, or am I buying out of Weird and Wonderful? And I'm asking this question, because you say you come from the e-com business
yeah.
background before you got into chocolate, and these are the kinds of things that I would sort of expect somebody who's running an e-com business to keep track of.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So actually, our superset of customers are still people who buy plain dark chocolate, and a lot of them buy 100% chocolate. We actually have probably the largest selection of single origin 100% bars in the world. I think as of our last count, we have about more than 50. Um, so that is still our number one customer, just people who want good dark chocolate and they don't want anything in it. Then the second one after that is the person who's trying everything and just wants something new. For them, the new arrivals page is the most interesting because they want to try something completely new and whatever's in season or whatever limited edition bar somebody has come out with. Um, so those are probably the two largest. And then as
Mhm.
far as like when you're not buying for yourself, the other big
Okay,
category for us is gifts, which is why it's actually in the primary of our navigation, as you can see up there. Um,
gotcha.
yeah.
Hmm.
So gifts are a big thing. And then what you mentioned too, I just wanted to point out about the French. If you're under makers, the makers drop down. We have very French because it is a big
Gotcha.
category for people that where
Hmm.
they just want that kind of French style of chocolate, right?
Yeah.
And so we
Hmm.
have that there. Um, And then as part of that too, we've made these additional categories, right? American classics, made at origin, and I will cycle through what's featured on these subcategories and swap makers out as depending on who has new product or how much we have in stock of
Mm-hmm.
someone. So you can see we have made at origin, which is made at
Oops.
yep, made in country of origin,
Mm-hmm.
and then sense of place was the other one that I had mentioned earlier on the call.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just some interesting ways for people to dig into different kinds of chocolate under each of the drop downs.
Gotcha. So, just looking again at the shop chocolate tab, I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a huge Gianduja fan. Whenever I'm in Turin, I'm going to go and I'm going to go visit the Guido Gobino shop, or going to visit, Guido Castagna and all these
yeah,
kinds of things. It's like, one of my favorite pieces is the Gobino sea salt and olive oil and sea salt cremino,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is, if you haven't, if somebody hasn't done that. So, Americans get Gianduja for the
yeah.
most part.
I
I mean,
think more so. Yeah, more so. Yeah, I think it's a really underappreciated,
mhm.
fourth category of chocolate, right? Like not dark, not milk, not white.
Not
It's
Ruby, but
yeah, not ruby. Yeah, yeah.
right.
Yeah, so we're really thrilled to have as many selections as we do from the
Mhm,
Italian chocolate makers that we carry,
mhm.
and then you can see like there's Hogarth that's from New Zealand, and
From New
his
Zealand. Yep.
yeah, and his John Dula bar is like really really good if you haven't tried it. And what's nice is like it's a dark interpretation
Mhm,
of it, and it's delicious.
mhm,
But yeah, like I think people are starting to get it, and we have a lot of people who will buy the Creminos in bulk from us, from whether it's Stillmore or Guido Gobino.
mhm.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I'm just, having had both of them, it's really interesting to me to have them side by side. My
Stillmore
approach to
and
my
Guido.
yeah, because
Yeah,
they're quite different,
yes, they are.
in
Yeah.
terms of their approach. So it's really quite remarkable, to see. So let's jump, if we can, to we had this before we do, just a quick reset. We're about halfway through today's episodes of Pod Save Chocolate. I'm joined today by Pashmina De Shon of Bar and Cocoa, who's a co-founder of the company. For people who weren't here at the very beginning, they've been around since about 2015 as a full service online seller of chocolate since 2018, 2019 or so. And we're talking about, selling specialty, what some people will call craft or artisan or bean to bar chocolate online, and, getting it from somebody whose day job is representing all of these makers. So more than 50 makers from more than 30 countries in over 1,000 different products, which is
Yeah.
quite an amazing, collection, to do that. If you have questions for Pashmina, or just want to let us know where in the world you're connecting from, you can go into the live chat in YouTube or the comments of Facebook and LinkedIn and say hello, or ask questions about what it is what is on your mind about. So maybe you are a specialty chocolate maker and you're interested in seeing what it is that you would need to do to become. I mean, because when we think about 50 makers, that sounds like a lot of makers, but there are probably more than 3,000,
That's
small
right.
specialty
Yeah.
chocolate makers around the world now. Nobody knows exactly how many. So it's a really, really interesting, question, and this is an interesting opportunity for you, if you're watching, to ask that question. What I want to do next, however, is, so Pashmini, you and I met actually face to face for the first time at the Southwest Chocolate and Coffee Fest in Albuquerque last month, so a little over a month ago. And then a week or two later, you were in San Francisco
Yeah.
for the craft chocolate experience. So can you tell me a little bit about, for you, right, how, those two, number one, audiences were different, right? And then, how were they different in terms of the kinds of questions that they asked, right? And then, if there was a difference in the products that they purchased as well. I mean, just trying to get, so, not saying this one was better or this one was, than another, but
Yeah.
how are the audiences different? Because, one of the challenges that you face, one of the challenges that I face, is how do we help grow demand for this product, which is in many cases significantly more expensive and in many cases requires a lot of work in order to understand how to appreciate
Yeah.
compared with most industrial chocolate that I'll find at a local, big box store or something like that. So Albuquerque first, and then San Francisco, and then see if we can do some comparison between the two of those.
Sure. So Albuquerque, we had a booth and we were selling chocolate, and I think the audience was more, it was more broad. So they were there for various reasons, right? They weren't just there for chocolate. They were there for coffee. They were there for candy, baked goods. There was all kinds of different categories of food there, and it really depended on the type of customer that approached you. Either they knew nothing about craft chocolate and they were curious, and they were, like we were offering free samples. So it was a lot of fun talking to new people and talking to them about how craft chocolate was different than most chocolate. And then there were some that were very, very, specifically like, oh, well, do you have any Belgian chocolate? And we'd have to say no and try and explain why. We don't carry anything made with Belgian chocolate in the way that they're imagining or they're looking for specifically. So I think the audience was very hit or miss in terms of like as being the right target audience for craft chocolate. Whereas San Francisco, the Craft Chocolate Festival there was geared specifically to craft chocolate, and that type of, the price points of almost all the brands there were kind of in the similar bandwidth, if you will. And we didn't have a booth there. We weren't selling anything, so I was just there to kind of just connect with people and connect with some of the makers we carry. Like hung out with Bayani for a bit, and Mission and some other makers, and Dandelion, of course, who were gracious hosts, and they did a really great job with putting together that event. Yeah, I think the audience is different. I think in San Francisco, there were people weren't as price sensitive, and they definitely had a lot more knowledge about what they were eating or what they were trying. So yeah, two very different audiences, and one being more special and small, and the other being a lot broader. So that's just kind of my take on the two.
Right. So I suppose the question, I mean, and maybe it's an unfair question. So I look at the two of them, and I wonder, there are certainly, so when we talk about specialty chocolate festivals, in the United States, right? So there hasn't been one in New York City for quite some time, right? And they're coming back this year to sell on in New York. We have Dallas, and we have the Northwest Festival, the DC Festival. But when we think about really just focusing on specialty chocolate, that San Francisco, which has been so important in so many ways. I mean, so the whole movement started there with Scharfenberger in the late 1990s, and then you've got Dandelion in the early 2010s. Then you've got Cho, who's a couple of years before that. And there's a lot of and Guittard, who is in that area and has been in that area for more than 150 years now. I mean, so it's a really, really seminal place to do this, right? But I suppose the audience that's coming certainly to that festival is one that's extremely knowledgeable about craft chocolate specifically, but are they also the people, as you talked about earlier, who have who've spent a lot of time educating themselves about other things as well, and so chocolate is just the new thing that they're educating themselves about? I mean, I don't know if you were able as a visitor to get any sense of that while you were there.
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, the people that I did talk to, they seemed very, they seem to be more knowledgeable just about the chocolate. And I think, you are buying a ticket to attend. So there is very much an intention saying like, okay, this is something I'm interested in. This is something I want to attend, and I'm going to buy a ticket to it. Right. So I think that that right there already kind of precludes anyone who's just like not interested in craft chocolate. I think you're there to kind of explore all these different brands, and something about them.
Gotcha. So apart from what about Belgium, going back to Albuquerque?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Did there seem to be a preference for, if we think about the categories of chocolate, right? So, as I remember, you had a fairly interesting and diverse range of offerings. in
Yes. Yeah,
Albuquerque.
we
There
did.
was
Yeah.
something for everybody, um,
Yeah.
irrespective of the price point. Um, and so, how did the people who were there, express their interest? Number one is like, again, apart from Belgium, the questions that they were asking, because I'm really
Yeah.
trying to get to, you know, these are two very different festivals. They represent very different segments of the community. And how do we go about communicating about the special brand,
Yeah.
unique selling propositions in order to be able to reach the audiences? Again, so if I'm a small chocolate maker, right, who is looking to reach out, you know, you know, and if I want to go to San Francisco, or something like the Craft Chocolate Experience, I need to organize and present myself one way, right? And if I'm
Yeah.
going to another festival like the one in Albuquerque, I need to present myself another way and adjust my expectations accordingly, which is another thing that's
Yeah.
also, I think, very, very important. Which
Yeah.
so I think many people will have said, yeah, I've been to something like the Northwest Chocolate Festival or something like that, so I have an idea about that, but may never have been to something like the Albuquerque Festival, which was a chocolate and coffee fest, right?
Yes.
But the people who came to your stand, and you were back to back with Guitard, right?
Yeah.
So, who is one of the main sponsors for it. So, again, apart from number one, and perhaps you can tell people who may not know the answer, why Belgium? Why are people so interested in Belgium as a place for chocolate? But apart from that question, how did you see buying patterns in terms of what people were purchasing compared with other fests that you've been to, which might have been more focused on, knowledgeable buyers?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have a reference point because this was our first festival that we've ever
Okay.
done. So it wasn't. I don't know that our experience is really going to inform the discussion of like what somebody might or might not do at these places. I think someone like Mission was actually at both, so Arcelia may actually have a better answer for
Well,
how those two
right.
compare.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and
she's
she
done.
has agreed. She has agreed to
Yeah.
come a
Yeah.
guest, but she had some chocolate that she wanted to taste and didn't
Yeah.
physically have it on her. And
Okay.
so she's going to send it to me, and then we're gonna have that question. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
so okay, so I suppose it had just completely escaped my attention for somebody who's been an online reseller for as long as you have, that you might not have ever gone to a consumer in-person fest before. So,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
so let's ask it a slightly different way. So apart from why
Yeah.
Belgium, which I think is a
Yeah.
question most people are going to ask, what was the most because you were there intercepting a lot of questions,
Yeah.
what was the most interesting thing that people wanted to know? Because you're right, I mean, there was a lot of what we would think of as candy there,
Yeah.
right? But there were some local specialty chocolate makers and some
Yeah, for
international.
sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
Argent Co from Nicaragua was
There were
there,
a lot.
Orinoco from
Yeah.
here, from Prescott. You have Eldora, which is local to Albuquerque, to
Yeah. Yeah.
Monsoon, who's
They're
also
great.
here.
Yeah.
So these are some great brands. Pollinator from Carbondale, Colorado. I had Mark on recently to talk about what they're doing. So then? Was there anything that surprised you about the experience? Let's think about it that way, right? In terms of what
Uh,
people were asking.
no, I really don't have a lot to add to that. Like, I mean,
Okay.
it was an interesting experience for us, but I don't know that we would go back necessarily. And the only reason we went was because it was over a weekend, and we were able to staff it and come back at like 6 o'clock in the morning and get back to shipping. Whereas a lot of these festivals, we just don't have the bandwidth or the resources. Like, we're a very small company. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we're focused on what we're good at, which is shipping chocolate and selling chocolate online. I don't think the like the festivals are kind of are really going to be anything that we're going to be doing in the future. It would
Which
take a
is
lot to it would take a lot to change my mind at this point.
right. It would. Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. And I think that the lesson that everybody should take from that is to understand what you're good at,
Yeah.
right? And understand what you want to do, and then to focus on those. And there are some things which may be outside your realm of expertise and outside your realm of interest. And you say, that represents an interesting opportunity, and you can put your toe in the water,
Yeah.
and see whether your idea about it sort of abstractly um, is the same as it is in reality. Because when I started out, I realized very, very quickly that I didn't want to be in the shipping business. If you're
Hmm.
going to sell chocolate online, right, you have this, how do I attract people to purchase it, right?
Yeah.
But then I have this question about, I have the mechanics of actually putting it into a box and getting it somewhere in good condition, right?
Yeah.
Which is a whole other thing entirely.
Yeah.
So speaking about that, when we have, we're, got about 10 or 15 minutes left here today. So unusually, it looks like Bar and Cocoa offers some things which I would think of as relatively short shelf life and relatively fragile when it comes to
Hmm.
shipping,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And as it just and not just bars. So when somebody comes to you, are you looking for that kind of diversity in product line from them?
Yeah,
So
I think it'd be great. Yeah, I think if more chocolate makers would stop making just bars and start thinking about other types of products, it would probably help both their sales and the industry at large to think about what other ways we can sell high quality craft chocolate. Whether it's things like what Monsoon is doing, where they do bonbons and they do things like malt balls and they do chocolate covered fruit. I think I'm sure has made a great addition to their lineup, and it's probably given them more exposure. And not everyone wants chocolate bars. And then the other thing to think about is gifting. So this comes back again to packaging. Packaging needs to be on something that you could see yourself giving as a gift. And if the bars themselves, you could think about secondary packaging, like bundling your products in such a way that it makes for a better gift presentation. Chocolate is still, still a default gift for a lot of people. So when you're thinking about how you can sell more chocolate, think about the reasons why people are buying chocolate, right? It's not just for personal consumption. And it's a good added value to have, is to think about how to package your chocolate in different ways.
Right. I suppose there are a couple of things which feed into that, immediately as I think about it. Number one is, you tag and categorize all of the products that come in, and
Yeah,
I would guess that almost every product fits in more than one category,
that's right.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so to some extent, having the same product show up in different contexts, there's this repetition, and people will go, "Oh, I hadn't thought about it this way, but it's interesting." So
yeah.
having more different things gives you as a marketer more different ways to present the product
Sure.
to
Yeah,
someone.
for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of months about the price of cocoa just shooting through.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you seeing that play out in terms of or have those increases in prices hit you in terms of your suppliers yet?
Yeah, yeah, it has. I think there were already price hikes during the pandemic, and during the last 4 or 5 years. We have seen a pretty noticeable increase in supply of and cost of goods. So a lot of it actually, during the pandemic, it was shipping. Shipping got very expensive, and that's
Mhm.
sort of come down a little bit. But packaging costs have gone up dramatically. Everything from the foil wrapper to the paper to how things are packaged has gone up dramatically. Even our shipping boxes, like the price of cardboard has gone up about 40% since 2020. A lot of
Mhm.
some of that has to do with the forest fires that we saw in California and Canada, and just reducing our
Mhm.
supply of cardboard. And then there's sugar. Sugar has gone up pretty dramatically in most of Asia and Australia and that part of the world, where I think in some cases it's gone up as much as 100%. So the raw materials have been going up incrementally, and then this
Mhm.
this whole cocoa thing is definitely going to be driving some of our suppliers to be increasing their wholesale price. I think the ones that are most affected are either the ones that are really small or really big. Um, and maybe the ones that are right in the middle are not as
Mhm.
affected, and because they're buying specialty cocoa and they're already paying a premium, maybe their cost won't go up as dramatically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, but but I think that so there are a couple of things tying into there that I want to just tie together. The first one of which is that, and this is a conversation that I had with some people when I was in Albuquerque, is that given just the stratospheric rise in prices of cocoa butter, right? Um,
Yeah,
one of the reasons to start thinking, if you're using cocoa butter, one of the reasons to start thinking about other things to make is that you can make things which actually cost you less to make, so
that's
you
right.
can
Yeah,
offer
yeah,
things. So by throwing a lot of lesser expensive inclusions into a bar, right, you can make something which is less expensive. But it also comes into this differentiation. If I look at, for example, some of the things that Auro is making, or the black lava barley bar that Omnom makes, and other things like that,
yeah,
you actually get to put a product in front of people that no one else is making.
yeah.
And how does that drive? In talking with new people, and again, going back to this, do we need another 70% two ingredient, from the same bean source that we're all doing going forward? And I think this is the last sort of thing, unless we have a couple of questions, is that, um, how does that, there's so very early on, and I think it was founded, a lot by, if I can make chocolate like the Mass Brothers make, or if I can wrap my bars like the Mass Brothers or Dandelion make, I will be successful, right? And it seems like there's been this, there has been a shift away from that. Number one, am I missing out on something? And how is that it, again, from your perspective, um, as an online reseller, of being able to offer somebody who provides multiple points of entry in terms of their product, so that somebody can consider buying 7 different products from the same company, whereas before, if all I did was 70% two ingredient single origin bars, I might buy one from. Long and deep and complicated, there are lots of different ideas there, I realize. I'm sorry.
So what is the question?
So it has to do with, I mean, there's a sense in which, if I'm a specialty chocolate maker, that, if I'm a bean to bar chocolate maker, that what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on making bars. And the ethos of bar making has for the most part been single origin bars, as opposed to blends, right? Or inclusions and lots of other things. So to what extent do you think, again, as somebody who represents all these different products and lines, how important is it for, a maker, whether they're especially new makers who are trying to establish themselves, to go in and embrace the notion of, creating something other than just a plain chocolate bar, to express their creative and their creative ideas? My idea. This is who I am as an artist, as a chocolate maker,
So
right?
how
And then
important
to
is
be
it?
more and to be more competitive in the marketplace.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
the question is, how important is it for them to embrace
yeah.
other things? I I mean, so the thing with two ingredient chocolate and not using cocoa butter, and you can have discussions with Dandelion who are very transparent about this process, but it's very hard. It's actually very hard to a make that and scale it. So you either are a chocolate maker, hit a certain point where you're trying to buy equipment to make larger batches of chocolate, and you will find that most equipment doesn't allow you to do so without a lot of labor or a lot of tinkering and a lot of customization. And Dandelion has taken that on, and they've decided that this is their take on chocolate. And they're not saying that it's the right or wrong take, but this is what they've decided to do. And they've found manufacturers of equipment that are willing to kind of go on that journey with them. And they're more kudos to them, because like what they've done is like figured out how to make two origin single two ingredient single origin chocolate in that way, and they've managed to scale it up in a way that probably no other brand has been able to do so before them. And they're still dealing with like handmade paper, and they have machines that get finicky with that handmade paper. So that is their journey and that their story. But if you're a chocolate maker starting out, like if you have dreams about scaling up that business, it's going to be very hard to stick to just making two ingredient chocolate. So that's one. And then the other thing is that to really put yourself on the map and to attract a larger audience, you're going to want to create unique products that maybe somebody else hasn't, right? So, even take someone like Crow and Moss. He has like the vanilla smoke, and he has cardamom creme brulee. Just exploring different flavors, right? And also like coming up with seasonal products like gingerbread. I think are a good strategy to employ if you're a chocolate maker trying to attract attention and to say, to show that you are different than what's already out there.
So going back to packages, just really quickly, for your
Yeah.
average customer, how important is 100% compostable? I mean, is it something they're all demanding,
No,
right? Or okay,
no. I think there's a balance there too, because a lot of the 100% compostable packaging right now, at least what's in the market, it's not great in terms of storing and keeping, kind of keeping that the flavors in the bar intact, and it can kind of create like a film on the chocolate sometimes, or it can just feel really kind of like cheap in your hands. So there's like a lot of different reasons why I would not necessarily place an importance on that. I mean, recyclable certainly, but like paper, foil, a lot of these things are not. They will eventually degrade. They're not made of
right.
plastic. So I think if you can avoid plastic, yes, do that. But does it need to be like this new age compostable thing? No, it does not need to be that. We don't need to worry about that. Yeah.
Right. And yes, so we can focus on things that are ostensibly recyclable, whether or not your local community, in fact, does recycle, right?
Yeah,
Which
sure.
is
Yeah.
another issue altogether. But because, it's one of the questions that people come to me and ask me about is like, where do they need to invest in their packaging resources? And so,
Yeah.
you know,
I think branding is like key, like just telling the story of your brand and how you package, kind of
mhm,
how that packaging looks. And then, for if you're starting to go into wholesale, then the other things that are important are like the integrity of the packaging. And even if you're shipping yourself, like if you are if you're selling chocolate online at all, you're going to want packaging that will stand up in an average shipping box and not be so flimsy that you're constantly getting customers complaining about receiving chocolate that's damaged or broken or hasn't held
mhm.
up well in that packaging. So that's an important consideration.
Yes, one of the reasons why I stopped shipping chocolate, right? Because being
Yeah.
responsible for somebody else's questionable wrapping was
Yeah.
something that you just got tired of writing those refunds to people, or reshipping something that got
Sure.
damaged, and then
Yeah.
trying to get UPS or anybody else to um, actually honor the insurance claims.
Mm.
Right,
Yeah.
you take something. So one final question as we do this, unless there's a question. Again, if you're watching, go into the comments. Let us know where in the world you're connecting from, and we can get that question to Pashmina before we leave. So, what is the next breakout customer? Your client, right? So what is you looking for, right? That sort of represents something in your portfolio that you don't have, or something that you'd like to go and put out there in the world for other people. Is there anything that people can go, yeah, you know, this is what you're looking for going forward?
In terms of the diversity of our products, like we have a lot, right? And most of them are bars. Um, so what I'm looking for as we kind of expand our makers is that we've actually, we now carry Mayana as an example, and they are not bean to bar. They are not a chocolate maker; they're a chocolatier. So we are looking at expanding into carrying more chocolatiers. So, but the ethos would be the same in the sense that we want to verify and make sure that these chocolate makers are using couverture that is either bean to bar or made ethically and is a high quality chocolate. And we're looking at confections and coated caramels and things like that as something to
Mhm,
expand into. So Mayana has been a nice addition, and we're also talking to some other chocolate makers, or rather chocolatiers, and
mhm,
thinking about expanding into that as a category. Um, a lot of that we've kind of stayed away from because of the short shelf life. But I think as we've grown and we're doing more volume, I
mhm.
think we could probably handle a little bit of that short shelf life, especially seasonally. So we'll probably look at doing that.
How short is short for you?
I think anything under 3 months is short. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
ideally, you're looking for something which is closer to the 6-month range.
yes, yeah, that would be
Okay.
ideal. Yeah, but that doesn't always happen. Yeah, like
No,
we have these.
it doesn't always happen.
Yeah, we have these, like really amazing chocolatejas from Maranao. It's like a Peruvian bonbon, and they have a pretty short shelf life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and part of it is also just how we communicate it, because a lot of people will buy the products and then they're like, oh, well, this expires in a month. And like Zotter bars are an example. They have a very short shelf life. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, that's actually really long if you think about what's in the bars. Like, there's no
Right.
preservatives to keep it from going bad. So yeah, a month is actually great. Um,
Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, by the time we get the bars, it's like 2 to 3 months at most
Yeah.
that we have in terms of shelf life.
Yeah, we can talk about sort of the like French culture, influencing the style of chocolate, like Bonnat, for example. But
Yeah,
there's part of it that I like about food culture is, they tend not to have big box stores. They don't go buy something and then buy a 3-year supply of it, right, in
yeah,
one go, because they don't have any place to put it. The fact is, you're going to buy the bread you need for tomorrow on your way home, right, and you're buying everything you need that way. So I think about the way I like to buy chocolate is I like to buy enough for, the next week or the next 2 weeks. I mean, I
yeah,
have, embarrassment of riches, the leftovers of 60 some odd bars from judging a chocolate competition,
yeah,
and I'm going, how am I going to get through all of this? Because it represents just huge amounts of chocolate that, a lot more chocolate that I would generally consume in any particular time. And so I would suggest that people, rather than buying enough to last you 2 or 3 months at a time, that you think about, okay, literally, and sort of put it in the refrigerator, you're right, and then eating a small piece at a time, and sort of rewarding yourself that way, to be a little more intentional about, realistic, I suppose, about um, you know, about how your purchase patterns, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. Get something which is going to be fresh, consuming it while it's fresh, right, and then go on to the
yeah,
next thing rather than going forward. Lots there to think about. And I certainly have questions that could take me for the next hour, but we are at the end of the hour. And I
yeah.
want to thank you very much for being us here today. We had this wondering, it's like, how is it going to go and how is it going to last? But what I do want to say to everybody is, this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go to thechocolatelife.com, and all of these stories are live. If you're not a member, you can just go click up here. Mine says account because I'm logged in. If you're not logged in, it'll click join. Just become a free member. This episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is supported by you, the members of the Chocolate Life. I'm not doing ads. I don't do Patreon. None of that stuff. And if you are interested, you can go over to the post for today's episode, which you'll recognize here. And then you can go to Bar and Cocoa. And now you know a lot more about how to buy chocolate from an online source like barandcocoa.com. Pashmina, any last minute words of wisdom for me, for an aspiring craft chocolate maker, for an aspiring customer of yours?
Yeah, I mean, do what inspires you, and for the customers, I think it's important to venture out, try something you haven't tried before, or go darker. If you're stuck in the 70%, go for the darker stuff.
So,
Up that.
so I'm thinking about that. So, if we think about, for example, I was in the spirits business for a number of years, and I
Yeah,
was out drinking a lot, and I wasn't drinking my stuff. I was drinking other people's stuff. And if
yeah,
you're in the world of beer, you're drinking other people's beer. If you're drinking wine, you're always drinking everybody else's wine. Right. So, you guys are evaluating chocolate so often. Um,
yeah.
do you find that the people who come to you, will say, when you say go darker, right? Are they spending a lot of time eating other people's chocolate? I mean, I don't
You mean our
know if
customers?
no, the people who are supplying you. I mean,
Oh,
so
oh
yeah,
yeah, they
because
spend a lot of time eating
okay,
other people's chocolate. Yeah, I think so.
okay,
Yeah, yeah,
right. Because I know, 10 years ago or so when I asked this question, it's like everybody is focused on their stuff,
yeah,
right? And they're all more focused on two ingredient, everything around 70%. That
yeah,
there was less I need to just expose myself. And I think, when we think about some of the more successful chocolate makers and chocolatiers that are out there, it's, somebody like Susanna, who is in this today. She actually is an advocate for the brand and travels internationally and brings an international perspective back to what it is that she's doing in Ecuador. And it shows. And the same thing is true of Picari. There are lots of brands in country that do that. But I think that one of the recommendations that I would make, if you are in fact, interested as a chocolate maker and having a business like Bar and Cocoa represent your product, is actually to become a customer of theirs. To go and say, "Ooh, this is interesting to me." There's a product of discovery, right? Whether you're browsing or searching, which you can go through, and that by becoming really, really aware of what it is that's going on all over the world, you can say, it will inspire you to go and to take hold of something which to be unique and to be genuine with respect to your approach for making chocolate, which I think is really, really important for all of this. I mean, there's a lot more to chocolate than 70% to ingredient. I mean, it's really important that people are making it, as you point out. It requires a commitment to a certain level of process and a certain level of ingredient quality in order to be able to do it and be successful at it. Um, but there is a lot to chocolate, and that exploring everything that it has to offer as a maker, right, is a really, really interesting opportunity and something that an online reseller like Bar and Cocoa is looking for.
yeah,
Is Yeah. All right. And with that, I want to thank everybody who's been here from the very beginning. I want to thank everybody who's joined us on a regular basis. This coming Friday is going to be Keith Ayub, who's a regular contributor to the Chocolate Life, was at the Craft Chocolate Experience in San Francisco, and he's going to be talking about it from his perspective, not being on the selling side, as somebody who is an enthusiast and lover of specialty chocolate. And with that, I want to remind everybody again, thank you very much, Pashmina, for joining us today. Is everybody, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, ciao, everyone.